Chosen one, God is not measuring you by how easy this month was. He is measuring you by what stayed pure in you when this month became difficult. 7 tests came at you in the same month, and they did not arrive wearing the name test. They arrived as silence, delay, being misunderstood, pressure, loneliness, temptation, and the final choice to surrender what you could not control. This message has reached you because a higher hand is bringing meaning to a season you almost misread as punishment. You did not fail. You were being proven. God saw the reaction you refused to give. He saw the door you refused to force. He saw the person you stopped chasing. He saw the bitterness you did not let enter your heart. He saw the old version of you calling from behind, and he saw you keep walking forward anyway. That is why the words are so specific. I am impressed. Not because you were flawless, but because you were formed. And before this message is over, you are going to understand the 7 tests that were hidden inside this month. You are going to see why they came so close together. You are going to recognize which one tested your silence, which one tested your patience, which one tested your heart, which one tested your standards, and why the final test was never about losing something. It was about releasing control so God could trust you with more. So do not treat this as casual background noise. Stay with this until the end, because one of these 7 tests will explain the exact battle you thought nobody saw. And when you recognize it, you will stop calling this month a breakdown and start seeing it as evidence that something in you has matured. Because this was not just another difficult month. This was a hidden exam. And the strange thing about a hidden exam is that you often do not know you are taking it until after your answers have already been given. You did not know your silence was an answer. You did not know your restraint was an answer. You did not know your refusal to chase was an answer. You did not know your patience in the delay was an answer. You did not know that every time you chose peace instead of performance, heaven was watching the weight of that decision. There are seasons when God teaches you through instruction. There are seasons when God teaches you through comfort. And then there are seasons when God allows life to press on different parts of you, not to destroy you, but to reveal what has already been built. That is what happened this month. It may have felt like everything came at once. One conversation left you unsettled. One delay made you question the promise. One person misunderstood you. One door did not open when you expected it to open. One old pattern tried to pull you back. One quiet moment made you wonder if God was still near. And while you were trying to process one thing, another thing appeared. You were not imagining that intensity. This month carried a kind of pressure that felt too exact to be ordinary. It touched your mind, then your heart, then your patience, then your identity, then your trust. It did not just test what you believe when you are inspired. It tested what you believe when there is no immediate evidence. And that is why the same month mattered. A compressed season is when God allows many small revelations to happen close together, because the old version of you can no longer travel into the next place. What used to take years to reveal can sometimes be exposed in weeks. What used to hide under routine can suddenly rise to the surface. What you thought you had already healed from may come close again, not because you failed, but because God is showing you that it no longer owns you. The pressure did not create your character from nothing. It revealed what quiet obedience had already been forming inside you. That is why this message is not here to flatter you. It is here to help you recognize the evidence. You passed the first test when you chose silence. Not the silence of fear, not the silence of being powerless, not the silence of someone who has nothing to say. You passed the test of silence when you had the words, when you had the proof, when you had the explanation, when you could have defended yourself, corrected the story, exposed the motive, and made sure everyone understood your side. But something deeper in you said, not this time. You knew that speaking would not heal anything. It would only feed the fire. You knew that explaining yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you would only drain what God was trying to protect. You knew that not every accusation deserves access to your energy. You knew that not every opinion deserves a seat in your spirit. So you stayed quiet. And that silence was not weakness. It was authority under control. There is a kind of strength that still needs to win every argument. There is a kind of strength that still needs the last word. There is a kind of strength that still needs everyone to know it was right. But then there is a deeper strength, the kind God forms in people who are no longer controlled by the fear of being misread. That is the strength He saw in you. You did not send the message. You did not enter the argument. You did not try to force someone to see your heart. You did not lower your peace just to prove your point. You let God be the witness when people were not willing to be fair. And maybe part of you wondered if staying silent made you look guilty. Maybe part of you worried that if you did not defend yourself, the wrong story would win. But chosen one, some stories only look powerful because they are loud. Truth does not need to scream to remain true. Your silence became a boundary. Your silence became an altar. Your silence became proof that you are no longer available for every battle that invites you. And this is where you must understand something deeply. God was not only watching what you said, He was watching what you refused to say. He was not only watching what you did, He was watching what you refused to do. He was not only watching how you moved in public, He was watching how you handled pressure in private. That was the first test, and you passed. The second test was delay. This one may have hurt in a quieter way, because delay does not always feel dramatic from the outside. People may look at you and think nothing is happening. They may think you are simply waiting. They may think your life is paused. But inside, delay can feel like a war between trust and panic. You had something you were hoping for, a door, an answer, a shift, a relationship, a breakthrough, a confirmation. A sign that the prayers were not just rising into silence. And it did not come when you expected. That is when the test began. Delay asked you a question that comfort never asks. Will you still trust God when the timeline does not explain itself? Will you still stay aligned when your emotions want to rush? Will you still believe preparation has purpose when nothing visible is moving? You passed this test every time you refused to force a door just because waiting felt uncomfortable. You passed every time you did not beg for access to something God had not opened. You passed every time you chose not to manipulate an outcome, not to chase a person, not to create your own version of the promise, just because the real one was taking longer than you wanted. That kind of patience is not passive, it is powerful, because delay will tempt you to become desperate. It will tempt you to accept less than what God is forming you for. It will tempt you to call any movement progress, even if that movement pulls you backward. It will tempt you to believe that if something has not happened yet, it never will. But delay is not denial when God is still developing the vessel. Joseph had a dream before he had a throne. He had a promise before he had a position. He had a calling before he had the character required to carry it. And between the dream and the palace, there were places that looked like contradiction. A pit, a prison, forgotten years, unfair treatment, silence from people who should have remembered him. But the delay did not cancel the promise. It prepared the man. And this is what God has been doing with you. He has been teaching you that the blessing cannot arrive faster than the foundation. He has been teaching you that timing is not punishment. He has been teaching you that what comes too early can become heavy in the hands of someone who has not been made ready. You may have wanted the door because you were tired, but God wanted you ready because He loves you too much to let your breakthrough crush you. What felt like delay was development. What felt like silence was strategy. What felt like being held back was actually being held together. And the fact that you did not run ahead, even when everything in you wanted proof, is why God is impressed. The third test was being misunderstood. This test cuts deeply because it touches the part of you that wants your heart to be seen correctly. It is painful when people misread your motives. It is painful when they take your distance personally. It is painful when they call your growth pride, your boundary coldness, your silence arrogance, and your obedience selfishness. You know what you meant. God knows what you meant. But they did not. And the test was not whether you could make them understand. The test was whether you would abandon your assignment, trying to manage their opinion. This is where many chosen ones lose strength. Not because they are weak, but because they are compassionate. They do not want to hurt people. They do not want to be judged unfairly. They do not want to be seen as difficult. They do not want to become someone who walks away too easily. So they over-explain. They shrink. They apologize for growth. They soften boundaries that God told them to keep firm. They keep handing access to people who only loved the version of them that was easier to control. But this month, something changed in you. You may still have felt the ache. You may still have wanted to explain. You may still have imagined the conversation where everyone finally understood your side. But you did not betray yourself just to be understood. That is maturity. Because some people can only recognize the old version of you. They knew the version that answered quickly, the version that showed up even when exhausted, the version that tolerated confusion, the version that carried everyone's feelings while ignoring your own, the version that would rather be drained than be called selfish. But that version of you is not the one God is building now, and when people cannot recognize your growth, they may call it distance. When they cannot control your new peace, they may call it pride. When they cannot access you the same way, they may call it rejection. But you must not make your calling smaller just to become easier to explain. You are not required to keep performing the old you so people can feel comfortable. You are allowed to grow quietly. You are allowed to obey God without giving everyone a full explanation. You are allowed to protect what is being built inside you. You are allowed to stop translating your heart to people who only listen for reasons to accuse it. And if you need one sentence to carry in your spirit, let it be this: I do not have to be understood by everyone to be obedient to God. Hold that sentence inwardly for a moment. Let it settle deeper than the need to be defended. Let it stand between you and every voice that tries to pull you back into performance. Let it remind you that peace is not always found through being explained. Sometimes peace is found when you finally stop offering sacred access to people who have treated your growth like an inconvenience. Chosen one. These first 3 tests revealed more than you realize. Your silence proved restraint. Your delay proved patience. Your misunderstanding proved stability. But these were only the outer gates of the month, because the next test went deeper. It did not just test your words. It did not just test your timing. It did not just test your need to be understood. It tested your heart after betrayal. And that is where many people lose the purity God was trying to protect. They survive what happened, but they come out bitter. They come out suspicious of everyone. They come out cold. They come out ready to punish the next person for what the last person did. But you are still here. And if you are still carrying even a small desire to remain soft without being foolish, wise without being wounded into hardness, and protected without becoming cruel, then the 4th test may be the one that proves exactly why God said, I am impressed. That 4th test was betrayal without bitterness. And this is where the month became more than tiring. It became personal. Because betrayal does not only hurt because someone did something wrong. Betrayal hurts because it makes you question your own ability to trust. It makes you look back at every conversation and wonder what was real. It makes you replay moments that once felt safe and ask yourself, how did I not see this sooner? But the test was never whether betrayal would hurt. Of course, it hurt. The test was whether hurt would become poison. This is where God watched you closely. Not in a cruel way. Not like heaven was waiting for you to collapse, but like a father watching a child carry something heavy, knowing that the way they carry it will reveal the depth of what has been formed in them. You were not tested by the betrayal alone. You were tested by what betrayal tried to awaken in you. It tried to awaken bitterness. It tried to awaken revenge. It tried to awaken suspicion. It tried to awaken the version of you that says, if people can hurt me this deeply, then I will never be soft again. I will never trust again. I will never open my heart again. I will become hard before anyone can reach me. But you did not let that become your final answer. You may have cried. You may have questioned. You may have gone quiet. You may have felt the sting of being mishandled by someone you once trusted. But somewhere inside you, something holy remained. You did not become cruel. That is why God is impressed. Not because you pretended it did not hurt. Not because you acted spiritual while your heart was breaking. Not because you smiled over a wound and called it peace. God is not impressed by denial. He is impressed by purity under pressure. And purity does not mean you were untouched by pain. It means pain touched you, but it did not get permission to rule you. You passed when you refused to make the next person pay for what the last person did. You passed when you refused to let one betrayal become the lens through which you judge every connection. You passed when you decided that wisdom can protect you without turning your heart into stone. There is a difference between discernment and suspicion. Discernment listens to God. Suspicion listens to fear. Discernment sees patterns clearly. Suspicion invents danger everywhere. Discernment protects your peace. Suspicion imprisons your heart. And this month, betrayal tried to push you out of discernment and into suspicion. It tried to make you build a wall where God was trying to teach you how to build a gate. A wall lets nobody in. A gate has wisdom. A gate has timing. A gate has standards. A gate opens only when peace and truth are present. That is what God is forming in you. Not a wounded person who trusts nobody. Not a naive person who trusts everybody. But a healed person who can discern. And I hear this rising in my spirit for the one who has been asking if God saw what happened. He saw it. He saw what they did. He saw what they said. He saw what they hid. But he also saw what you refused to become. And that refusal mattered more than you know. Because anyone can look pure when nobody has harmed them. Anyone can speak of forgiveness when nothing has been taken. Anyone can say they trust God when people are treating them fairly. But when betrayal touches your life, and you still refuse to let hatred become your language, something powerful has happened inside you. You are no longer being carried only by emotion. You are being governed by spirit, and that is rare. Job was tested in ways that would have made many people curse their life, curse their future, and curse the God they once trusted. He lost more than most people could imagine. He was misunderstood by people who should have comforted him. He sat in questions that had no immediate answers. But even in the ashes, his story did not end with the wound. His story became a witness that suffering does not get the final word when God is still present in the story. And that is why your betrayal is not the end of your softness. It is the refining of your wisdom. It is the place where God teaches you how to keep a clean heart without handing sacred access to unsafe hands. So, if you need a sentence to carry inside you, carry this one: I did not become bitter. Let that sentence move through the place where the betrayal still echoes. I did not become bitter, not because it was easy, not because they deserved immediate access to your heart again, not because the pain was small, but because your calling is too holy to be poisoned by what someone else failed to honor. That was the fourth test, and you passed it in a way that heaven noticed. The fifth test was loneliness without lowering your standards. This one is quiet, but it is powerful, because loneliness has a way of negotiating with your values. It does not always come screaming. Sometimes it whispers. It tells you to text the person you already outgrew. It tells you to return to the environment that drained you. It tells you that any attention is better than waiting for the right connection. It tells you that being included is worth the cost of being diminished. And this month, loneliness came close enough to ask you a question. Will you return to what is familiar just because what is holy feels empty right now? That question was not small, because the space between who you were and who you are becoming can feel lonely. When God separates you from old patterns, He does not always replace them immediately. Sometimes there is a holy gap. A space where the old no longer fits, but the new has not fully arrived. A space where you are too healed to go backward, but not yet surrounded by what matches your future. That space can feel like rejection if you do not understand it. But it is not rejection. It is separation with purpose. Some people left because they were attached to the version of you that survived by overgiving. Some conversations became draining because your spirit is no longer fed by the same noise. Some rooms feel heavy now because your inner life has changed, and what once felt normal now feels like a cage. That does not mean you are better than anyone. It means you are being called higher in responsibility, higher in discernment, higher in obedience, higher in the way you carry your presence. And that is not always comfortable. There may have been moments this month when you felt the ache of being alone so strongly that the old door started looking attractive again. The old relationship, the old habit, the old group, the old way of being needed, the old way of being available to everyone, so you would not have to sit with the fear of being forgotten. But you did not lower your standards just to fill the silence. You did not trade your peace for temporary company. You did not walk back into a place God had already delivered you from, just because the wilderness felt quiet. And that is why God is impressed. Because loneliness is one of the deepest tests of identity. It reveals whether you know who you are when nobody is clapping. It reveals whether you still value yourself when nobody is choosing you loudly. It reveals whether you can stand in a quiet season without begging the wrong people to make it noisy again. The chosen one often has to learn this the hard way. Not every empty space needs to be filled. Not every absence is a loss. Not every closed circle is rejection. Sometimes God removes the crowd because the crowd was making it too easy to ignore the calling. Sometimes He allows the room to get quiet because your spirit has been crowded by voices that were not assigned to your future. Sometimes He lets people misunderstand your distance because He is teaching you not to explain every act of obedience. This is where the cycle breaker in you becomes visible. You are breaking the cycle of returning to what wounded you just because it is familiar. You are breaking the cycle of calling dysfunction home. You are breaking the cycle of letting loneliness make your decisions. You are breaking the cycle of confusing access with love. And if there is one inner action to practice here, let it be this. Picture the old door in your mind, the door that still calls you when you feel alone. Do not walk toward it. Do not fight it. Just see it. Then imagine God placing a calm light between you and that door. Not a wall of fear, a light of wisdom. And inside that light, say, I do not return to what God has already released me from. That is not a physical action. That is a decision inside your spirit. Because before your life stops going backward, your inner agreement must stop going backward. The sixth test was temptation and the old identity. This test often comes after loneliness because the old identity knows when you feel vulnerable. It waits until you are tired. It waits until you feel unseen. It waits until you wonder if your obedience is even working. Then it returns with a familiar voice. It says, come back. Come back to the old habit. Come back to the old reaction. Come back to the old relationship. Come back to proving yourself. Come back to numbing the discomfort. Come back to the version of you that did not have to carry this much responsibility. And for a moment, it may have sounded reasonable. That is what makes this test dangerous. Temptation rarely presents itself as destruction at first. It presents itself as relief. It presents itself as comfort. It presents itself as one small compromise. One conversation, one shortcut, one reaction. One night of returning to something God already told you was finished. But the old identity does not come back because it loves you. It comes back because it senses that it is losing control. The old you knows the new you is becoming too strong to manipulate. The old pattern knows your discernment is growing. The old environment knows your tolerance has changed. The old fear knows you are starting to trust God in a way that makes you dangerous to everything that used to keep you small. So it tries one more time. And this month, it tried you. Maybe it came through anger. You had every reason to react, but you did not let rage use your mouth as a weapon. Maybe it came through desire. You wanted comfort so badly that the wrong person started looking like an answer. Maybe it came through impatience. You wanted movement, so you were tempted to force a decision before peace had confirmed it. Maybe it came through comparison. You looked at someone else moving ahead and wondered if you should abandon your path to copy theirs. Maybe it came through weariness. You were simply tired of being strong, tired of choosing the higher road, tired of being the one who has to keep growing while others seem free to stay the same. But you did not hand your destiny to a temporary feeling. That is discipline, not perfection. Discipline. You may have had the thought, but you did not let the thought become a throne. You may have felt the pull, but you did not let the pull become your path. You may have remembered the old comfort, but you also remembered the cost. And that is where maturity appeared. What once controlled you now had to ask for permission. What once pulled you instantly now had to fight through your discernment. What once felt like home now felt like warning. That is evidence of growth. You are not the same person who once ran back without thinking. You are not the same person who confused intensity with love. You are not the same person who called chaos passion. You are not the same person who chose familiar pain over unfamiliar peace. Something in you has changed, and the old identity knows it. But there is another layer here, and this is important. Sometimes you are not only tempted by what is behind you, sometimes you are tempted to sabotage what is ahead of you, because success can be frightening when you have spent so long surviving. A new level can feel heavy, visibility can feel unsafe, responsibility can feel like pressure, blessing can make you wonder, what if I cannot carry this? What if I fail publicly? What if I become someone I do not recognize? What if people see me and discover I am not as strong as they think? That fear does not always mean you are unready. Sometimes it means you finally understand the weight. People who have no reverence rush into doors carelessly, but people who have been refined understand that every open door carries responsibility. Your fear, when surrendered to God, can become wisdom. It can make you humble. It can make you prayerful. It can make you careful with what others misuse. So do not let the fear of success push you back into the identity God already delivered you from. You are allowed to rise without becoming arrogant. You are allowed to be seen without becoming fake. You are allowed to receive without becoming careless. You are allowed to carry more without losing your soul. And you are allowed to become someone your old environment cannot fully explain. This is why the sixth test mattered so much. It proved that the old version of you is no longer in charge. The temptation came, but it did not own you. The memory came, but it did not master you. The fear came, but it did not govern you. The opportunity to compromise came, but it did not become your decision. And now we have to touch something deeper before the final test is revealed. Because many chosen ones think the battle is only spiritual in a distant way. They think it is only about prayer, only about faith, only about resisting people and patterns. But sometimes the battle also touches the state of your mind, your clarity, your focus, your ability to hear God without the noise of survival drowning everything out. There is a kind of God-given capacity you once carried more easily, a sharper knowing, a cleaner intuition, a quicker ability to sense what was right, what was wrong, what was aligned, what was not. Some of you remember being younger and feeling like your mind was more alive, more open, more sensitive to meaning, more connected to wonder. Then life became heavy. Pressure trained your mind to survive instead of receive. Disappointment made your thoughts louder. Betrayal made your inner world guarded. Delay made your focus scatter. And little by little, the clarity that once felt natural started feeling distant. Later, I will come back to this, because there is a little-known connection between your inner state, your God-given clarity, and the way your mind can be guided back into focus. Not as a replacement for prayer, not as a shortcut around obedience, but as a tool that may help some people understand why their spirit feels ready, but their mind still feels covered in static. For now, just hold this idea gently. Your next season will require not only a clean heart, but a clear mind. And that is why the final test matters more than all the others. Because after silence, delay, misunderstanding, betrayal, loneliness, and temptation, it may seem like the whole month has already been explained. You may think the 7 tests were simply about people, timing, pain, standards, and discipline. But they were all leading to one deeper question. The question behind every question. The test beneath every test. Will you surrender the outcome to God when you can no longer control the timing, the person, the apology, the proof, the door, the answer, or the way the story unfolds? That is the 7th test. And this is the one that heaven was waiting to see. Because anyone can say they trust God while still holding every piece in their own hands. Anyone can pray while secretly trying to control the result. Anyone can speak faith while manipulating the timeline. Anyone can claim surrender while still bargaining for the version of the blessing they already imagined. But the final test asks something deeper. Can you release the outcome and still remain obedient? Can you stop forcing clarity and still keep walking? Can you let God be God, even if His way does not match the picture you built in your mind? That is where the next part begins. And when you understand this final test, you will understand why the entire month was not just about surviving pressure. It was about proving that you can be trusted with the next level without needing to control every detail of how God brings it to pass. And that trust is revealed most clearly when you reach the place where your hands can no longer control what only God can carry. That is why the 7th test was surrender. Not surrender as defeat, not surrender as weakness, not surrender as pretending you no longer care. True surrender is when you still care deeply, but you stop letting your need for control become your God. It is when you stop gripping the timeline so tightly that your fear begins to speak louder than your faith. It is when you stop trying to manage every person, every outcome, every apology, every door, every delay, every detail, and you finally say, God, I will obey what you have shown me, but I will not keep trying to control what belongs in your hands. That was the deepest test, because silence can be difficult, delay can be difficult, betrayal can be painful, loneliness can be heavy, temptation can be strong, but surrender touches the place where your will meets God's will, and that place is sacred. This month asked you, will you still trust God if the answer comes later than you wanted? Will you still trust God if the person never apologizes? Will you still trust God if the door opens differently than you imagined? Will you still trust God if the blessing arrives in a form you did not plan? Will you still trust God if the old dream has to die so the real assignment can live? This is where many people fight the hardest, because control can feel like safety. When life feels uncertain, the mind wants to grab something. It wants a date. It wants proof. It wants a message. It wants a sign. It wants the story to unfold in a way that makes sense immediately. But God does not always give you control. Sometimes He gives you instruction. Sometimes He gives you peace. Sometimes He gives you one step. Sometimes He gives you silence. Not because He has left, but because He is teaching you to walk by trust and not by constant explanation. Esther did not step into her assignment with every detail solved. She did not know exactly how the king would respond. She did not know how the story would unfold. She did not have control over every heart in the room, but she understood that her obedience mattered more than her certainty. That is surrender. It is not the absence of fear. It is obedience that has stopped bowing to fear. And this month, you passed that test in quiet ways. You passed when you stopped refreshing the same worry in your mind. You passed when you stopped rehearsing the same conversation with someone who was not willing to hear you. You passed when you stopped begging God to bless a path that He was gently closing. You passed when you stopped trying to drag the old season into the new one. You passed when you said, "Even if I do not understand yet, I will not go backward." That sentence carries authority. Even if I do not understand yet, I will not go backward. Let that move through your spirit for a moment. Do not turn it into a performance. Just let it become an inner agreement. Picture every test from this month standing behind you like 7 gates you have already walked through. You do not need to run back to prove you passed. You do not need to reopen the gate of silence, the gate of delay, the gate of being misunderstood, the gate of betrayal, the gate of loneliness, the gate of temptation, or the gate of surrender. You walked through them. You are still here, and you are not the same. Now you can understand the deeper revelation. The 7 tests were never separate. They were one complete examination of readiness. Your silence tested restraint. Your delay tested patience. Your misunderstanding tested stability. Your betrayal tested purity. Your loneliness tested standards. Your temptation tested discipline. Your surrender tested trust. Together, they revealed the question God was really asking. Can you carry the next level without losing yourself? That is why this month felt so intense. It was not just about whether you could survive pain. You have survived pain before. It was not just about whether you could wait. You have waited before. It was not just about whether you could forgive. You have forgiven before. This month tested whether all of those lessons had become part of your character. Not just something you say. Not just something you believe when life is calm. Not just something you post, pray, or speak when you feel strong. But something that remains when pressure arrives. Because the next season cannot be carried by the old version of you. The next season cannot be carried by the version of you that reacts to every accusation. It cannot be carried by the version of you that forces every door. It cannot be carried by the version of you that returns to old patterns when loneliness speaks. It cannot be carried by the version of you that lets betrayal make your heart cruel. It cannot be carried by the version of you that needs to control every detail before trusting God. So God allowed the tests to reveal the version of you that can carry more. And that is why He is impressed. Not impressed like a human being, impressed by image. Not impressed by performance. Not impressed by noise. Impressed by formation. Impressed by restraint. Impressed by purity. Impressed by the decision you made when nobody saw it. Impressed by the old door you did not reopen. Impressed by the bitterness you did not let stay. Impressed by the surrender that cost you something. And now you need to know what often happens after a month like this. Do not expect everything to become loud immediately. Sometimes after a proving season, God begins with clarity before He begins with visible movement. The first sign of a new season is not always a dramatic breakthrough. Sometimes it is a cleaner yes and a stronger no. Sometimes it is a deeper peace around a decision that used to terrify you. Sometimes it is a strange disinterest in what used to tempt you. Sometimes it is the quiet realization that you no longer fit where you once begged to belong. Your relationships may begin to reorganize, not because you are rejecting everyone, not because you are above anyone, but because alignment has a sound, and your spirit is beginning to recognize what matches and what drains. Some people will not understand your new boundaries. Some will call your peace distance. Some will feel offended that they no longer have the same access. Let that happen without letting guilt become your guide. The people assigned to your future will not require you to become the old you in order to be loved. Your purpose may become more specific. You may not receive the entire map, but you may receive the next step, and the next step may look smaller than you expected. A call to speak with more honesty, a call to create, a call to serve, a call to leave a pattern alone, a call to protect your morning, your focus, your prayer life, your emotional space. Do not despise a small instruction. Many large doors begin with one quiet act of obedience. Your provision may also begin to shift. But understand this carefully. Provision is not just money. Provision is support, timing, wisdom, opportunity, strength, relationships, ideas, and the ability to steward what arrives without losing your center. God does not only provide resources, He forms the person who can carry them without being controlled by them. That is why the tests came first. The blessing needed a vessel. The assignment needed a stable heart. The next level needed a surrendered spirit. And this is where I want to return to something I mentioned earlier, because it matters for many chosen ones who feel spiritually ready, but mentally exhausted. There is a difference between having a calling and having the clarity to walk it out. Some of you know God has been forming you. You feel it. You sense that your life is not random. You know the tests have not been meaningless. But even with that knowing, your mind sometimes feels covered in static. You try to pray, but your thoughts scatter. You try to focus, but pressure keeps pulling you back into survival. You try to hear clearly, but the noise of disappointment, fear, and fatigue makes everything feel heavier than it should. And I want to say this with honesty. There is no product that replaces obedience. There is no tool that replaces prayer. There is no shortcut that replaces character. But sometimes a tool can support what God is already doing in you. This is why I want to share something called the Genius Song. It is a 7-minute digital audio track designed to be listened to through headphones. Its purpose is to support the mind through brain entrainment, especially around the kind of focused, clear, heightened state often associated with gamma brainwave activity. Think of it this way. If your mind has been living under the noise of pressure, fear, betrayal, and survival, sometimes you do not need more effort first. Sometimes you need help returning to a clearer inner state, so the effort you make is not fighting through so much static. I am not presenting this as magic. I am not presenting it as a replacement for faith, wisdom, action, or real support. I am presenting it as a tool for the person who feels like their God-given clarity has been buried under years of stress, delay, and disappointment. The idea is simple. You put on headphones, you listen for 7 minutes. You allow the audio to guide your mind into a more focused inner state. No complicated ritual, no long routine, no need to force yourself into a spiritual performance. The original price is $49, but for viewers of this message, it has been reduced to $39. It is delivered digitally, so there is no shipping, and it also comes with 4 bonuses, including a track for children, a classic book connected to deeper financial thinking, a guided visualization, and a practical infographic for building better habits. It also includes a money-back guarantee, so if you explore it and feel it is not for you, you are not trapped in the decision. I also want to say this clearly. Be careful with fake versions. When something begins to get attention, copies appear. Some may only be ordinary sounds without the actual brain entrainment technology built into them. The safest way to explore the original version with the bonuses and the guarantee is through the link I left in the description and the pinned comment. Do not feel pressured. Only explore it if something in you feels led to do so. And after you look at it, come back to the deeper truth of this message. Because the tool is not the center. God is the center. Your formation is the center. Your obedience is the center. Your clean heart is the center. Your surrendered next step is the center. The tool may support clarity, but the calling still requires your yes. And now, before this closes, I want you to receive the full meaning of what you just walked through. You were not tested because God hated you. You were tested because something in you was ready to be revealed. You were not delayed because you were forgotten. You were delayed because your foundation mattered. You were not misunderstood because your voice has no value. You were misunderstood so you could learn that obedience is higher than approval. You were not betrayed so you would become hard. You were betrayed so wisdom could rise without love dying inside you. You were not lonely because you are unwanted. You were lonely because God was teaching you not to settle for what cannot honor your spirit. You were not tempted because you are weak. You were tempted because the old identity wanted one more chance to reclaim authority. You were not asked to surrender because God wanted to take everything from you. You were asked to surrender because your hands were too small to carry what only His hands could arrange. This is the moment where your spirit must stop calling the month a failure. It was formation. It was fire, but it did not consume you. It was pressure, but it did not corrupt you. It was silence, but it did not erase you. It was delay, but it did not cancel you. It was loneliness, but it did not lower you. It was betrayal, but it did not poison you. It was surrender, but it did not defeat you. You passed, and I hear this in my spirit, for the one who knows this message is speaking directly into their month. God is saying, I am not asking you to prove yourself again. I am asking you to walk like the one I already proved. Stop returning to the rooms that made you question your worth. Stop shrinking your obedience to comfort people who did not honor your growth. Stop calling yourself behind when my timing has been protecting you. I saw the tests, I saw the choices, I saw the restraint, I saw the tears you did not use as an excuse to become cruel. I saw the old door call your name, and I saw you keep walking. Now walk like you believe I was there. Chosen one, this is your commissioning. Not into pride, not into superiority, not into thinking you are better than others, but into responsibility. A chosen one who passed the tests must walk differently. You cannot keep giving your energy to every battle. You cannot keep negotiating with the old identity. You cannot keep apologizing for boundaries God told you to build. You cannot keep calling delay rejection. You cannot keep letting loneliness make your standards negotiable. You have crossed too much to go backward casually. So here is the inner action for this moment. Picture the 7 tests behind you, like 7 sealed gates. Do not touch them. Do not reopen them. Do not argue with them. See them sealed by the hand of God. Then imagine the path in front of you becoming quiet, narrow, and lit only one step at a time. You do not need the whole map. You only need the next obedient step. Inside your spirit, say this: I will not go backward just because forward requires faith. Say it again inside yourself. I will not go backward just because forward requires faith. Let that become your agreement. And if this message confirmed what you have been living through, write this in the comments. I passed the 7 tests, not as performance, not as noise, as a witness, as a marker, as a way of telling your own spirit, I understand what this month was now. And if you want to keep receiving messages that help you walk your chosen one path with clarity, healing, and discernment, subscribe and stay close to this space, not for entertainment, for alignment, for remembrance, for the moments when pressure tries to make you forget what God has already shown you. You passed the test of silence. You passed the test of delay. You passed the test of being misunderstood. You passed the test of betrayal without bitterness. You passed the test of loneliness without lowering your standards. You passed the test of temptation and the old identity. You passed the test of surrender. Now carry the lesson without carrying the weight. Carry the wisdom without carrying the wound. Carry the calling without carrying the need to control. God is not finished with you, and the month that tried to exhaust you has become the month that revealed you. So walk forward slowly if you must. Walk forward quietly if you must. Walk forward with tears if you must. But walk forward, because the old season has lost its authority. The tests have spoken, and you are still standing.